Dr. Wanis is a colleague of mine. I met him maybe like 4 years ago at a business something
Event.
type deal. And he lives in Florida. He's I call him a cognitive specialist. That's just how I name him, to help people, know what he does. But I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Thank you, Clifton. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of your program and to hopefully get some positive messages and help some people. That is what I do. I help set people free from the past. You've referred to me as a cognitive specialist. I refer to myself as a human behavior expert, but that's okay. The most important thing is that I do work on two levels, working on the cognitive, that means on the mental aspect, your thoughts, and also working on the emotional component. Because our thoughts determine our emotions determine our actions determine our results, but our emotions also affect our thoughts. So it's sort of like a cycle or a loop. We create certain subconscious beliefs, we have certain beliefs, and there's always emotions attached to them. So to make any sort of behavioral change, we have to work on both levels. What's the thought, what's the belief, and what are the emotions that are attached or associated to that belief?
Perfect. Okay. So you have this technique that you've created called SRTT, which stands for Subconscious Rapid Transformation Technique. What is that? What's the benefit of it? And, kind of just talk about that a little bit.
Subconscious Rapid Transformation Technique is something that I developed organically over quite a few years. And primarily, it's a very simple technique of identifying what is it you want that you don't yet have, getting to the root cause of that thing you want to change. Perhaps you want to change a behavior, you want to change a belief, you want to change the way you feel. I determined very quickly, where did this start? How did it begin? What was the origins of it? Then I safely take you back to identify, describe, list, validate those emotions, release those emotions, and then also identify what's the belief that you have. And then we work together to let go of that belief so that you actually present love, forgiveness, and compassion for yourself and for whoever else was involved. And ultimately, you're set free without, this is very important, without reliving the pain or trauma. So this is a fantastic technique, particularly for people who've experienced any sort of trauma or any sort of childhood abuse or just anything negative that's happened in your life, which is every single one of us. But being able to revisit that from a different perspective, from a distance, with new insight, new wisdom, new understanding, to let go of the emotions, to change that disempowering belief, but without feeling any pain. It doesn't help you to relive pain when you're trying to let go of pain.
So, that's really important to know, because that was one of my questions that I was going to ask. Sometimes I tell people about doing trauma work, and they are apprehensive because they don't want to re-experience the pain. They say, they don't really want to revisit. They don't want to deal with it. And so, they're kind of like hesitant, like, nah, because they've kept it covered up for so long. They feel like that's the way that I cope. That's the way that I deal with it. Not realizing how much it is still affecting their lives. And so the approach that you have is to do work and release the emotions and deal with the trauma without re-experiencing the trauma. I think that's important.
Here is the best way to describe this. Every one of us has heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. What is PTSD? It's these flashbacks, it's this reoccurrence, it's the reliving of the trauma. So someone who has PTSD, say from a military experience, from a war zone, suddenly hears the sound of some aeroplane and imagines that he's right back there and starts to relive that fear, that anxiety, that trauma. There can also be PTSD from a molestation, an abuse, or a rape, or some other negative experience. So I say, if you understand what PTSD, which is simply reliving the trauma, the pain, the experience, then why would you think that going back and putting yourself inside that negative experience is the way to heal it? It isn't. In fact, I tell clients right from the beginning, when we're about to start a session, I'm going to help you to detach yourself from this, to stand back, become an observer, and then interact with what happened, but not relive it. You can't let go of the emotion whilst you're re-experiencing the emotion. I can't say to you, oh, Clifton, you have a problem with anxiety? Good, let's bring up the anxiety and then you'll be out of it. No, it doesn't work that way. In fact, I have to get you out so that we can create new neural pathways, but you can't do that whilst you're experiencing or re-experiencing the emotion, the pain, or the trauma. And it's very interesting because this isn't something that I'm not the only person that ever created this. Even in Buddhism, they talked about this. They talked about identifying and labeling emotions. And recently, there was a scientific study that found by labeling the emotions and by separating and referring to yourself in the third person, you can actually coach yourself and you can bring about more behavioral change than referring to I. Let me share this with you, Clifton, and see what you think of this. We all want to change the way we think, the way we feel. We try to change our identity or our self-image, our self-concept. And how do we do that? We do that with a way that even I used to teach many, many years ago, affirmations. So we stand in front of a mirror, we say, I am skinny, I am rich. But our subconscious mind goes, no, you're not, you're overweight. No, you're not, you have lots of bills and you're poor. So what you're doing is you're actually creating resistance because you're trying to talk over an existing subconscious belief. And you already have a self-image and a self-concept. So the words I am are important, but you're not going to change them by just repeating more words of I am. How did you form your self-image, your self-concept, or your identity? It all began, of course, in childhood. But for you to have this thing of saying, well, I am a behavior expert, and I am this, and I'm that, and I'm kind, and I'm generous, and I'm noble, how did you get to that? That self-concept was formed in your early years primarily by the people around you who told you things about you. So they said you're smart, or you're intelligent, or you're dumb, or you're fat, or you're ugly, or you're good looking, or whatever it is. It was your parents that started telling you who you are. And then you also form beliefs about yourself, about your self-image and concept based on your interpretations of those experiences. If you were bullied at school, even though you're an adult now, you're still experiencing pain because those bullies said things about you that you subconsciously absorbed and formed as part of your identity. My point is, you can't just use robotic repetition to change a subconscious belief because your subconscious mind will go, no, you're not. This is who you really are. Mm-hmm. So the technique that I use is very, very different because I take you back to that originating experience, to the early part of your childhood, and you look at it without reliving the pain. Now we can together identify every emotion that you experienced in that incident, help you to release that emotion. And here's something interesting, because I know you and I have done sessions together, or you've done sessions, and I don't remember if this happened for you, but it happens for many clients. We're at the point where we've identified one of the core emotions is sadness. And so I say, how would little Julie like to let go of that sadness? And the client says, well, Julie's holding on to it. So she's talking about herself, but she has an image of the child. And the client is subconsciously holding on to that sadness. So I say, why is little Julie afraid to let go of the sadness? And she says, because that's all she knows. Aha, the sadness is part of the identity. So if you just today say, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, your subconscious self-image, self-concept, and identity is, no, I'm actually sad. And we actually hold on to those things like anger, fear, anxiety, sadness, because they've become part of our subconscious identity. And we say, who will I be without them? Because that's all I've known my whole life. All I've known is to be doubting myself, to be insecure, to be sad, to be afraid, to be angry. How will I be? Who will I be without that emotion? And then I present the other option. The other option is, well, who are you really? Mm-hmm. What are your characteristics? What are your qualities? What are your traits? What are your skills, talents, gifts, and abilities? And as you start to identify them, you're reshaping your identity. And now you're able to let go of that sadness and fill it up with something else. It's a little bit like a habit. You don't really break a habit, you replace it with something else.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's good. So I've been to school, did bachelor's psychology, master's marriage and family therapy. So I'm well aware of, what the subconscious is, but that sounds really psychological. What do you mean when you say subconscious? And this concept that you taught me, uh, so and you can kind of tie the two together. How does that play? What is the law of deservedness?
So let's start with the subconscious mind.
Hmm.
So there are primarily two parts to your mind, the subconscious and the conscious mind. The conscious mind is your logical, analytical, reasoning faculty. Subconscious mind is your emotional mind. Your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between something that's real and an imagined experience. Your subconscious mind doesn't really have a concept of time. It just loops everything. So something that happened 20 years ago, if it's triggered, can feel like it's happening right now. Your subconscious is your emotional mind. Your subconscious mind, as I said, has no concept of time, and it also works in symbols and imagery. That's why the technique that I use, I refer to symbols and imagery. We talk about an image of letting go of the emotion. Even though we like to think, oh, I'm a very smart person. I've got this degree and that degree, and I'm intelligent. Everyone tells me I'm smart. I must be operating purely off my prefrontal cortex, my conscious mind. But we're not. We're always in conflict. See, the conscious mind says, I should be eating this, or I should be doing that, or I should be kinder, or I should speak differently. But then something happens and it triggers the pain, and the subconscious mind takes over. So there is a difference between the two minds. And I think of it this way, the prefrontal cortex is our executive decision maker. This is the part that basically is our logical reasoning faculty. That's why kids have a problem trying to control their emotions, because the prefrontal cortex is still developing, and it doesn't fully develop. The brain doesn't fully develop until your early 20s, a little older for boys than girls.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have teenage children and they do stupid stuff and you say, what were you thinking? Well, they weren't thinking because they weren't using the prefrontal cortex. They were working off emotions. So that's the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. I can logically tell you, Clifton, everything that happened to you as a child, your mum, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, was blah, blah, blah. And you go, yeah, I know that, but I can't seem to let go of it. Why? Because the logic isn't enough. You have to tap into the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, having worked with many clients over many years, and particularly in the early years of my work here, I started working with a lot of celebrities. And then I noticed a pattern of self-sabotage. But then I read, wait a minute, this isn't just limited, or it's just part of only being, rich or affluent or influential or powerful or famous. It applies to every one of us. And that is that we tend to self-sabotage. So what happens is that we have a subconscious belief about ourselves and the world around us. Am I a good person? Am I worthy? Am I lovable? Am I special? Am I good enough? Do I belong? Am I acceptable? Am I valuable? And what about the world? What kind of world is it? Is it a safe place? Can I trust others? Can I not trust others? They're all subconscious beliefs. And to the extent that you believe that you are worthy and deserving of love, joy, success, happiness, whatever it is, that's the place that you'll get to. If you subconsciously don't believe that you deserve to be loved, and along comes someone and starts loving you, you'll push them away, you'll sabotage it, or you'll just walk away, or you simply won't be able to accept it. So we actually will never allow anyone to love us above the subconscious level that we believe we deserve to be loved. In other words, no one can love you more than you love yourself. If you believe out of 10, oh, I'm only really worthy of being loved to a 4, that's the relationship you're going to have. And you're going to attract people that treat you to a 4. So I ended up coining or terming this phrase, the law of deservedness. And the law of deservedness is simply a philosophy, a principle. And we can refer to it as sort of metaphysical, but I can also explain it because I've worked with psychologists and said, here's how it works psychologically. And that is, you only get what you subconsciously feel and believe you deserve and no more. If you get more than you subconsciously feel and believe you deserve, You'll sabotage it, you'll push it away, or you simply won't enjoy it. Now, if we put that aside and say, well, okay, Patrick, explain this to me in basic psychology. Basic psychology is, if you don't think you're good enough, you're going to sabotage your life. If you were treated poorly as a child, even though you're consciously looking for someone to love you and treat you well, perhaps make up for what you didn't get, deep down you don't believe you're worthy of that. You don't believe it's part of your identity. So you sabotage it, you push it away, and you go back to what? The familiar, the person that treats you poorly, the person that's abusive, etc. Now, I'm not saying this to say if your life's a mess, it's your fault. It's to simply explain how you got there. And because you got there, you can get somewhere else by changing your subconscious beliefs. Because there's an energy we have, Clifton. You walk in a room, you look around at the room and you say, particularly if you're a woman, because women are much smarter than men at this, they're very intuitive. They look at someone, they say, oh no, I would never trust him. Collectively, you and I, men, women, look at someone and go, that person's important. But we don't know who they are. They don't have a label on their chest. But the way they walk, their posture, their aura, their energy tells us they feel, believe, and act as if they're important. I did this once in a nightclub in Houston with a mutual friend. And I was sitting there, and I was sort of bored at the time, and I'm just sitting on this sofa, and my arms are stretched out to the side. And I'm just sort of like this, you know. And multiple people came up and said to me, excuse me, are you the owner? I said, the owner of what? The owner of this club. I went, no. Like, but the way you're sitting. And then I'd be standing by the doorway and the people would think the same thing. Why? Because of the way I was standing, because of the energy I was giving off. So we do this subconsciously, unconsciously on a regular basis. We give energy off. I was talking to someone on the phone who was asking me about victims and crime. And I said to her, there was research done on this, and many various researchers and psychologists have interviewed criminals and asked them, how do you select your victims? And they'll say, I can look at a crowd and know what type of person each person is. And I'll know that that person is gullible. I'll know that that person is weak. I'll know that that person's afraid, etc. We're constantly giving off energy, aura, and unconscious messages. So does that answer the question?
Yes, very much so. But that last part just made me have another question. I was writing it down, but now I can ask. So then why, I have some people, and I think I did it too before I got in this current relationship, but why do I continue to attract the same people? And actually, so I'll tell you what I tell people when they ask me that.
Okay.
And then I think you can explain it. So I said, what? Because a young lady asked me this, I think last week. Why do I keep attracting, you know, she didn't say scumbags, but basically scumbags.
She said scumbags. Okay.
And so I said, well, it's actually not that you are attracting them. That's not the issue. The issue is you only let the scumbags in. I say, because if you take inventory, there are probably good guys that approached you too, but you never saw them because of the lens that you have. Talk about that.
I think that's a fantastic explanation. I definitely would agree with you on that. I would also say the reason that it's definitely true that we have filters and we look for certain things and we don't notice the other things. If I start teaching you if I keep saying the word red, 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 you will notice everything that's red in the room. And it's the subconscious mind that looks for what's similar. It's the conscious mind that notices what's different.
Wait, hold it. So the whole time we've been talking, I have not noticed this pink flower on my background till you just said that. I'm not kidding. As soon as you start saying red, I can see it right now. Yes.
Right. So what you choose to focus on, you'll notice more. That's why there's the expression, you get more of what you focus on, because you actually notice it. If you're in the market for a Lexus and you say, I think I can get the model CRX. That's probably not a Lexus, but anyway. And I say, but what color are you thinking about? You go, red's my favorite color. I think I'm going to look for a red Lexus. As you're driving, you suddenly start noticing how many red Lexuses are on the road, but you never noticed them before because now you've placed your focus of attention on a red Lexus and then you start noticing them. So it's definitely true that if you have a subconscious thought, you're going to notice more of that, whatever it is, whether it's good. If you think that the people can't be trusted, you're going to notice all the people that can't be trusted. You won't notice the people that can be trusted, because there's also part of you that wants to reinforce and prove yourself to be true.
Mm-hmm.
You're subconsciously trying to prove true your beliefs. Your beliefs become true. The other aspect of what we're saying here is, why does a woman keep attracting a particular type of person, a scumbag? Because she subconsciously also believes that's what she deserves. So she notices those people and, as you said, allows them in and also is attracted to them. Consciously, if she says, I'm going to look for people that are this way, and this way, then she'll be attracted to, or at least she'll start noticing more of. I remember once, many, many years ago, Clifton, there was a client, and when we were talking about healthy relationship, she said to me, I have no idea what a healthy relationship is. I went, what? And I said, well, no wonder you can't attract a healthy relationship. You don't even have a definition for it. You don't even know what it is. So let's get clear about what is a healthy relationship. What is love? What is the way that you want to be treated? Rather than just going, ooh, butterflies, I'm attracted to this person, let's get in a relationship. What about everything else? Don't just be caught up with the infatuation or the sexual chemistry. What else is there? So I would say, notice the pattern of people to whom you're being attracted and whom you're attracting, and then look for the similarities with your parents and with what you subconsciously believe that you deserve, and particularly the way you believe you deserve to be treated. I teach that you teach others how to treat you. You'll never let anyone love you more than you love yourself. And if you believe that you are worthy of being loved to this degree up here, when someone starts treating you down here, you go, no, 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 I'm not going to accept that. If someone starts treating you up here, you go, no, 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 this is where I am. I actually, in fact, this is how you and I met. We met at Action Coach. And I was talking the other day to, because I was being invited again to teach at Action Coach. And the whole reason that I was brought in was to talk about this law of deservedness, because what he noticed was that his clients had financial limits. Like they just couldn't get past making this amount every year. That's the same concept. It's the law of deservedness. How much do you believe that you deserve? And there was a classic example of one particular gentleman who I think was highly successful, but he couldn't make past 6 figures because of something that his mother said about people who made more money than that. So at a subconscious level, I think she may have said, people that make 7 figures are evil or whatever. And so at a subconscious level, he didn't want to let down his mother, and he didn't want to fall into the belief that I'm one of those bad people. So he would never make more than that. It's the same thing. When I'm working with clients and I have to teach them to set their boundaries, we have to say, well, what are your boundaries? Like, what is a boundary to you? Not just what is the definition of it, but ultimately boundaries are what you'll accept and what you won't accept. And then you look back at your child and you go, well, how was I treated? What was I forced to accept? So therefore, what do I subconsciously believe about myself? If I'm always putting other people first and putting other people's needs first, that's probably what I was taught as a child. Mm-hmm. Put everyone else first. Let's say you're the eldest child in a very large family and you had to take care of all of your siblings. But no one ever asked you what you want or what you need, because you're expected to take care of 4 or 5 younger siblings. And your mum and dad were busy, so they didn't have time for you either. Then you learn to become either a people pleaser or at the very least, a caretaker. When I was teaching at Shell Health, there was a large group of people who in the Department of Shell Health were nurses or involved in that aspect. And they were all caretakers. I already know that they grew up doing the same thing. So then I have to pose the challenging question, which is, you're always taking care of everyone, and I bet you take care of everyone in your personal life as well as your professional life. Who takes care of you? And did anyone ever take care of you? And of course, the answer is no. So then we have to reprogram that by going back and working with the subconscious belief, which is, I'm supposed to take care of everyone. That's my role. That's my identity. That's the way I get love. That's the way I become significant.
Mhm.
So subconsciously, we also believe, oh, for me to be loved, for me to be worthy of love, for me to be significant and to be noticed and to get attention and to be validated, I must take care of other people.
Mhm.
It's the same concept with the example you gave of a woman who attracts scumbags. It's what I refer to as twisted love, or a twisted definition of love. For children, attention is equivalent to love. If they get positive attention, they have a positive understanding of love. If they only get noticed when they do something wrong, then they believe that's the way I get noticed.
Mhm.
So we end up forming a definition of love based on what we experienced as children.
Mhm.
And that can either be a twisted definition of love or a healthy definition of love. The good news, of course, is that I can help you to change that, to reprogram that, to create a new definition of love.
Good stuff. That's good. And so, if you guys are just now joining, talking to Dr. Wanis, I know you saw that in your email. And if you're wondering, yes, I am going to ask some, like, actual therapy client questions. I'm gonna get to that. So, just stay tuned. It's coming. But this stuff is good, and it's helpful in general for you to deal with, because the topic that I chose was basically I think I said how your childhood sabotages your marriage or whatever.
How your subconscious beliefs affect
Okay.
or impact or sabotage your marriage and relationships
Yeah.
and life.
And so, what about the people who, I didn't have a traumatic childhood. I believe I had a good childhood. But as we talk, then they say, well, my parents were strict because they wanted me to be successful, right? And maybe the issue that they're dealing with now is, they can't be vulnerable. They're really rigid. They're successful in their careers, but they suck in their marriage. How is that, or can be, tied to their childhood?
Well, I believe that everything goes back to your childhood. There's obviously other major life events that can occur in your teen years, in your 20s, and your 30s, and that can also change or impact you. Most of our personality, temperament, character is formed in the first 8 years. The largest percentage, maybe 70, 80%. Children learn 4 ways, and I know you know this because we've talked about this before. The first way that children learn is they watch, they copy what they see. The second is they listen to what you tell them, and they believe what you tell them, particularly what you tell them about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The third way that children learn is they have individual experiences, and then they make inaccurate interpretations about those experiences. So, for example, a child who has parents who divorce will make an inaccurate interpretation about that particular event, because children are egocentric and think the universe revolves around them. They say, "Ooh, mummy and daddy divorced. Daddy's leaving mummy. Daddy's leaving me. Daddy's leaving us. It must be because of me. There must be something wrong with me." So children bring it back to themselves. They make inaccurate interpretations. They blame themselves. They think there's something wrong with them. The fourth way that children learn is they absorb the dominant emotions of the household, or the emotions of the caretaker, mum or dad or whoever, with whom they most related, resonated, or connected with. So children are watching and copying you. They're believing what you tell them about themselves. They're making inaccurate interpretations about life. They tend to blame themselves, and then they're absorbing the emotions. So if you're a parent who has lots of fear and anxiety, your child's going to have fear and anxiety. Now, that's not to attack you, but to help you to become aware. So most of this is formed in childhood. So even if you didn't have trauma, abuse, serious neglect, or abandonment, but what about if your parents were just really busy because they had to both work hard to raise you? But you, therefore, never got much attention. You also had siblings, and your parents' limited time of attention had to be divided between four. But guess what? You're number two, or maybe you're number one, and the youngest one is always going to get the most attention, because the youngest one is going to scream for more attention, and the youngest one needs more attention. So you didn't get a lot of attention, or because of the way your parents were raised, they didn't validate you. What did they do? Perhaps they were critical, condemnatory, judgmental. Perhaps they were angry. They were going through stress. So they invalidated you by criticizing you, by only noticing what was wrong and pointing that out to you, but never pointing out what was good. The third form of validation is a lack of validation. This is where your parents were just too busy to give you any attention. So they didn't notice you. So you walked around feeling invisible. And now what do? You want to be a star on a stage. You want to have lots of people following you on Instagram and all these other forms of social media. Why? Because you want the attention to fill the inner emptiness because you didn't get the validation and the attention that you really wanted, needed, and deserved as a child. And therefore you feel empty and you feel invisible.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Okay. So those are three that I wrote down. So let's see. Some of the questions that I got. When men, particularly married men, are addicted to porn, is that just a man thing, or would you presume something deeper is going on?
Okay, first thing is, I wouldn't justify it by saying it's a man thing, and I'm not attacking you. I'm saying there's no way I would ever label it as a man thing, because incidentally, women can also watch porn, and there's porn designed for women. Mm-hmm. There are two things that are two to three things that are going on. One, and this one's something shocking because I have never talked, I know you and I have talked about this before with clients who experience porn, but recognize what is the emotional pain beneath. What is the emotional pain that you're running away from that you say, I'm going to turn to porn? Because it's really trying to satisfy or quell or curb a deeper emotional pain. So I'm going to run away from my reality, from myself, from my pain, by escaping into this instant gratification, this supposedly pleasurable activity. The next thing that it does, or the next potential motivation behind watching porn, is because you have a major problem with emotional intimacy. It could be physical intimacy, but it's most likely emotional intimacy. Because if you said, oh, I've got a great emotional, intimate relationship with my partner, you wouldn't be turning to porn. So I would say it is true that men have a different perspective on sex versus women. Men and women have equal libidos. There's no doubt about that. And women can have many, many more orgasms than a man can. And I believe that the female body is designed more for pleasure than the male body, primarily because if you look at the amount of nerves over the female genitalia, specifically the clitoris, it has the greatest concentration of nerves of any part of the human anatomy. So you have to ask yourself, well, why was that? Anyway, so
that's going to my book.
Okay.
It's a book, and that is really important because, well, anyway, I'll let you finish.
It's a good point, though, because you got to look at it. So, all right, so men and women have very strong libidos, but women have a different interpretation of the sexual connection. For most women, they want to know that there's an emotional connection as well. Mm-hmm. Whereas men can compartmentalize and say, this is just physical, this is physical and emotional sex. So when women are threatened by cheating, they're not as hurt or as threatened by the physical cheating or the physical betrayal or infidelity as they are by the emotional betrayal and infidelity. Now ask a man, how does he feel about emotional infidelity versus physical? And he'll go crazy over the physical infidelity, and he'll go, oh, I don't care that much about the emotional, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's true that men do look at sex as very much compartmentalized. They can sort of tend to objectify it, etc. But when a man in a relationship, particularly a marriage, is turning to porn, this is a form of addiction, or at least a form of compulsive behavior or escapist behavior designed to escape a deeper emotional pain. What's the easiest way for me not to face my wife, my girlfriend, my partner, not to face my own pain, my own fear of rejection or challenges I have with acceptance, with intimacy, with trust, with vulnerability? What's the easiest way to escape that? Go to the computer and look at purely objective sex. That's where the woman is completely objectified, and now I don't have to think about any sort of emotional connection, any sort of emotional relationship, and guess what? She also can't reject me. So I think there are many layers, but primarily I say it's a form of escape. It's a form of escaping yourself, escaping a deeper pain. For some people, I have had clients in the past who had a problem with this, and it was because of loneliness, because they were struggling to connect with women. So they were single. And I remember saying very clearly to this one client, let's just call him Robert, I said, Robert, the more you engage in watching porn, the harder it's going to be for you to have a relationship with a woman, not because you're going to think that this woman this you just met should be like a porn star and should just, give it up easily or get into all these twisted sexual positions, but rather you're shutting down your ability to make a deeper emotional connection with another human being. And what you're doing is you're isolating yourself. And now, we haven't mentioned this part yet, the more you look at porn, the more you're going to say, this is where my pleasure and my sexual satisfaction and gratification is going to come. It's going to come from the porn. It's not going to come from my wife. It's going to come from the porn. It's not going to come from any future woman. It's highly destructive. If you as a couple choose to watch porn, that's your decision, and you have to be very careful because you've got to think, how is my partner fantasizing in the porn? Because here's another interesting one for you. If a man and a woman are watching porn together, the woman's watching the woman experience the ecstasy, the pleasure, and she's thinking, wow, I want to experience that pleasure and that ecstasy. The man's looking at the porn and he's looking at the woman in the porn and saying, I want to do that to her. Now, I could be wrong. This is just what I've based off many years of experience with clients, as well as research. So again, you've got to be careful if you are going to subject yourself to watching porn. And unfortunately, we've made it so common, so acceptable, so mainstream. I remember when I was growing up, having a Playboy magazine was a sin. I grew up in a very strict religion, and fortunately, for whatever reasons, I actually followed the religion, which is rare, and I never did that. But looking at anything like that was a huge sin. Today, it's like, that's corporate porn. That's nothing. It's soft porn. What do you mean soft porn? It's still porn. There are obviously higher and more degrading levels, but the point is that we've made it so acceptable and so available that children are watching it and they're getting twisted ideas of human connection, human pleasure, and human satisfaction.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good. Okay. So, and guys, if you want to type a question, I can't promise I'll get to because I have some, but if you want to type a question in, I'll definitely try if we have time. Actually, we're getting close.
Well, I can give more concise answers if you want.
Well, no, I think the way that you're giving the answers is good because you hit a lot of different points. I think that's
okay.
Powerful. So this one is a little bit more specific. I came up with this question, but it's like a combination of situations I know. So there's a lady who was born to a teenage mother.
Okay.
Her mom was hooked on drugs, so the child stayed with her grandmother. Over time, the child felt responsible for getting her mom off of drugs, but mom never did. Eventually, mom died out in the streets on drugs, and now the young lady feels guilty, and she also has self-doubt. Would she be a good candidate for SRTT? How could SRTT help her?
So SRTT, subconscious rapid transformation technique, will definitely help her. And I've had situations very similar to that. There's a thing that we refer to in psychology as survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt can be different levels. Survivor's guilt is this person that I loved died, but I survived. I feel bad for surviving. Why didn't I die? Why didn't I die? Why did they die? That's something. Now, when we're talking about children and parents, children have an innate tendency and desire to protect a sick or parent that's in danger. Children do that naturally, even though the parent's role is to take care of the children. If mum or dad is sad or angry or unhappy, the child wants to relieve them of that pain. If the child sees that mum is hurting, she wants to help mum. If she sees that mum is doing drugs and destroying her life, she wants to help mum. These are beautiful qualities. These are great qualities that definitely need to be validated, appreciated, acknowledged and reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
What I do in SRTT at a subconscious level, not at a conscious level, is help the client to change, to appreciate what that little girl did and the desire of the little girl, but to help her to let go of the guilt, because a child isn't responsible for a parent and a child couldn't save the parent. Other adults couldn't save your mother. Why would you think that you as a child could? But this information, this message has to enter at a subconscious level. So yes, we carry around a lot of guilt. I tried to save my parents, not from drugs, but I tried to make them happy. I tried to help them. I tried to heal them. And then it took me, because I didn't have SRTT technique at the time, it took me many years to say, wait a minute, that wasn't my role. Mm-hmm. Even though they gave me that role and I accepted that role, it's not my role. It's not the role of a child. Because if you hold onto that role as part of your identity, you'll keep wanting to do that, and you'll look for people that are like your mother or father, and you'll try and do the same thing to them. You'll try and save them because you're still subconsciously trying to save your mother. Mm-hmm. And guilt is a good thing when it's appropriate, meaning guilt is your conscience. Your conscience says, I hurt Clifton. I shouldn't have done that. I need to address that. I need to correct that. I need to compensate for that. I need to express compassion or whatever. We also need to look at guilt and say, was it your intention to hurt the other person? Oh, it wasn't. So it was an accident, or you didn't know any better. That helps to relieve guilt. And then the third component of guilt is, how is guilt benefiting you? Because a lot of us don't realize that subconsciously we think that we're benefiting someone by being guilty. I should punish myself because my mother died, referring to the case you put. There was a client that was actually referred to by you to me, and she was punishing herself because her grandmother died at age 19. And so she'd been sabotaging her life for about 10 years. And through the subconscious rapid transformation technique, I helped her to say to her, at a subconscious level, to recognize, what did your grandmother, it was her grandmother, what did your grandmother really want for you? Did she want you to suffer? Oh, no, she believed in me. Well, in what way did she believe in you? She believed that I was this and I was great and I was this and that. I said, so do you think that if she were able to see you now, she would be celebrating, going, oh, great, my granddaughter's suffering because I died. Oh, my granddaughter's life is a mess and she's in misery. That's fantastic. I'm happy. Or do you think if your grandmother were able to see you, she'd be celebrating the fact that you're living life to its fullest? If you want to honor the love that your grandmother expressed to you, then live life to its fullest. If she was the one that believed in you more than anyone else, then accept that. Don't reject it and say, because she died, therefore everything she said about me wasn't true. So notice that I'm also presenting these arguments of evidence to help change the subconscious belief. But they're done through the technique, because if I just threw them out at you, they probably may not work. You might feel something now because there's a connection or a resonance, but it really works during the session.
Right. And, and that's why there's another question on here I didn't ask, because you've answered it kind of like, collectively in just different places, but it was, how come, just receiving information, isn't good enough to change or to deal with the issue? Because when you're receiving the information, it's going to your conscious mind, and the subconscious is not really getting in there.
That's part of it. I would say the other part is that, is the information sufficient to change the subconscious belief? So I might consciously know, well, your dad was abusive because he was abused as a child. All right, I got that information. Your dad really loved you. He just didn't know how to love you. Okay, I got that information. Your dad was isolated and cut off because he didn't think he was good enough and worthy. Okay, I got that information. But here's the difference, Clifton. In the subconscious, well, you know this, in the subconscious rapid transformation technique, that information is being relayed from the client to the image that the client has of the younger self. So let's say it's Sally. Sally's relaying that information to the little girl, Sally. That means she has in her mind an image of a little girl. That's her self-concept. And
Hmm.
she's relaying that information to the self-concept, and boom, it's changing. And if resistance comes up, then we work on the resistance. Everything starts with our thoughts, the
Hmm.
perception, the perspective, the way that we see life.
I try to tell clients a lot of times, even when I'm doing work and it's not SRTT, um, I say sometimes you can be too smart for your own good, or you can have too much knowledge and you think that you're smart, but you are not who you think you are. And so, they'll have a little bit of information that's accurate, but then they'll conclude other things. And so it's difficult for us to do work. And like what you just said, it helps me. I try to help them see, hey, there's something deeper going on with your beliefs, not just, well, this happened, that's why I'm that way. Yeah, but there are other. Here's one of the most fascinating things that happened in my. I think it was my first or my second session with you. I think I've done 4 over the 4 years, but
Okay.
it was when I was talking to Little Clifton, and I learned things that he felt and believed that I never knew as an
Good
adult.
point.
I did not know that was in there. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that he interpreted that way. And so then when we did work to release it, man, it was like magic.
You've raised a fantastic point. There's a lot of beliefs that we're not even aware that we have, possess, and that we live off. It was the same thing for me, that if you said to me many, many, many years ago, Patrick, you just wanted your dad to love you. I go, what? No, I just want him to leave me alone. You really wanted to get the attention of your dad? No, I just want him to leave me alone. I didn't even want him to have anything to do with me. I wasn't even aware of the deeper hidden desire that, as any young boy, as any young child would want, I wanted to be wanted, I wanted to be noticed, I wanted to be loved by both my mother and father. And yes, you're right, there are many, many subconscious beliefs. I didn't even realize that at a subconscious level, I was really, really angry at my paternal grandmother for something that she did. Now, if you asked about that incident, I would have said, yeah, that was awful, that was horrible. But I never knew how angry I really was or how it affected me. So it's a fantastic point you've raised. Many of us are not even aware what are our real beliefs. And I remember pointing this out with another new client recently. And I'm trying to think of the exact example, but I remember how amazed he was when he realized that he actually did feel different, and therefore as an outsider from his siblings, because of the way his parents treated his siblings. So his siblings were into sport, and they loved sport and they excelled at sport. They did what most American kids do, and they played sport. But he was book smart. He was a deep analytical thinker, and he wasn't interested in sport. He wanted to study. He was curious. He wanted to take things apart.
Mhm.
But his parents didn't get that. They didn't understand that. And instead of encouraging him to be more of who he is, they were sort of saying to him, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you like your brothers? And he didn't even realize the impact that way of being raised had on him. Nor did he realize how at a subconscious level he therefore felt that there was something wrong with him and that he was weird. And children, we have so many bizarre beliefs that come down to this, a little bucket that is basically fits under not good enough. So I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not special, I don't belong, I'm an outsider, I'm not worthy of connection, um, there's something lacking. And I remember even having one client who's, because she'd been abused as a child, she asked the question, I don't even know why I'm on this earth. So the way, like you said, there are many subconscious beliefs that we're not even aware of. But through the work that I do in subconscious rapid transformation technique, we quickly uncover those beliefs, and more importantly, I help you to change them or release them.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, so I'm actually this question. Now, I think this is more of a question for me because you're not necessarily a marriage therapist. However, I'm curious to see how you would answer it, even like with your knowledge of humanity and people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still relevant, and maybe even SRTT. I don't know. But the question is just this, and it's I think it's kind of vague. But what do you do when, let me see, what do you do when you and your spouse argue about everything? And let me add to that. What do you do when you and your spouse argue about everything? And then, what do you say to someone who always, who primarily believes their spouse is their issue and not their
What?
own issues?
Okay, these are two very different questions. The second question, most spouses believe it's the spouse that has the issue. Men
Hmm.
will think it's the wife will think it's the man, etc., or the wife and wife, whatever. That's not unusual.
Hmm.
But let's talk about the bigger issue. When you say, what do you do with a couple, or what do you say to a couple who say we argue about everything? The first thing I would say is, was it always like that? When did it begin? So I want to know, were you always arguing? Maybe you were attracted because you enjoyed the arguments, but it's most likely that there was a turning point of some kind. So was it a major life event that was never resolved? Something happened, maybe a betrayal, something else, a loss of some kind, and then the resentment was tucked in, locked in, because the actual real issue was never addressed and never resolved and never brought to completion. So now what's happening is you're arguing about everything because there's an unresolved issue, there's a deeper pain. That was my next point. I was going to say, if you're arguing about everything, then I want to know, what are you really experiencing? What's the real issue between the two of you? It's not about the toothpaste, who's going to pick up the kids, or what are we going to have for dinner. What is the real issue between you? What is it that you haven't spoken to your partner? What is it that you're running away from? What is your pain? What is your hurt? What is your judgment? And what is your expectation of your partner?
Mm, that's good. That's good. So here's the SRTT question. So I know every case is different, but on average, how long and how many sessions of SRTT does it generally take for noticeable change to take place? So let me answer first, and then you can give the more detailed answer. Uh, one, and I'm not exaggerating, usually there and Patrick will talk about this. There are definitely situations where it may take more than one, but most of the time, and I think with the clients that I see, most of the times it can be taken care of in 1 or 2 sessions. But I'll let you say.
So I'm going to answer your question, because your question was, how many sessions does it take for noticeable change? 1 session for noticeable change. To clear out the entire issue depends on what the issue is. So for example, I know from years of experience with clients, if there was sexual abuse, molestation, rape, it could take between 6 and 10 sessions, because when there's sexual abuse, there are so many consequences, so many beliefs that occur as a result. First, there's the belief, I can't trust anyone. Sometimes there's the belief, what I want is irrelevant, because the abuser says to them, this is our secret. And the abuser thinks only of their own pleasure. Sometimes the person, the victim of abuse, also feels dirty and tainted, like physically dirty and tainted. That's 1 session. So right there, I've just given you an example of potentially 3 sessions. Here's another one. The victim is always angry, not just at the abuser, the molester or the rapist, but at the parent who failed to protect the child. This is very common. Ellen talked about it because she experienced it. And then there was another lady who's a TV show host, where she was crying and she's saying to her mother, why? Why didn't you protect me? And this is something that's very common that I've found working with clients. And it's interesting, if it's the stepfather that was the molester, or if it was the boyfriend, or even the father, the girl will actually be angrier at the mother than at the actual predator, at the rapist or the molester or the abuser, because she believes mum should have protected me. Mum failed to protect me. Now, if the child was abused outside of this, the child could be angry at both parents for failing to protect them. So there, I've just given you sort of 5, an example of 5. Each one of those issues would be 1 session. But to be able to do that in 5 and 6 to up no more than 10 sessions is extraordinary. I have clients who've been to various therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors for years and years, and they still have exactly the same issue. Give you an example. a positive example of how SRTT is effective. A client comes to me, he was referred to me by his mother, he's 19, and he's been having panic and anxiety attacks for 6 years, he's 19. And she says, well, I took him to a psychologist here in Mexico City, and the psychologist made him worse because the psychologist just gave him more fear based on what she told him. After the first session, and incidentally in the first session, I'm dealing with the root cause of anxiety. I want to know what created this anxiety. So I'm dealing with childhood issues that were traumatic for him. The arguments between his mother and father when he felt extremely insecure and afraid and used to cling to his mother's dress. That's the end of the session, and he says he feels extraordinarily relieved. We don't talk for 2 weeks. In the second session, I say, so how are you? How have you been? What's happened to the anxiety attacks? He says, well, prior to the first session, I used to have panic and anxiety attacks every day. Since then, in the past 2 weeks, I've only had 2 panic attacks, and they haven't been as severe. I said, oh, this is good news. Wait a minute, though. What triggered them? What happened? And then I come to find out it was connected to things that were happening with his mother. Session number 2, what do? We work more on the trauma, more on the pain and the experience. Session number 3, how have you been in the past week? I just had 1 panic attack and I was able to control it because now I'm able to control my thoughts. Excellent. Now we're due up to session 4, which will happen next week. I know that this kid, this teenager, is going to be free of that panic and that anxiety. I said to him, we're working on reestablishing your sense of security, not just your psychological security, but your sense of physical security. Because if your father was alcoholic and aggressive, you were afraid. If you got bullied at kindergarten and then at primary school, then at middle school, which he did, you're going to also have fear for physical safety. So we have to deal with both. So notice what I've just described, Clifton. I've described the fact that I always go to the root cause of the issue. I'm not going to spend your money reading 10 volumes of your entire life story. I'm going to get straight to it. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to do it with you. So we do a process together. I'm not sitting there and lecturing you. That's a waste of time because you probably know what you need to do, but you say, I don't know how to forgive. I don't know how to get over it. I don't know how to let go of the pain. I don't know how to let go of the sadness. I don't know how to control the fear or the anxiety. I don't know how to control the rumination. And what I do also, Clifton, is I work holistically. That means I'm also going to say to you, what else are you doing? Are you sleeping properly? Are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night? What are you eating? I'm not going to give you a diet, but I want to know if you're eating healthy. And if you're not, then I'm going to say, find yourself someone who can guide you. I want to find out, are you exercising? Because that's what I did with this particular gentleman. And his name is Alex, and I can mention his name because he's actually given me permission to use our sessions for training of other therapists. And before I even started working with him, his mum said, would you please talk to him? And I said to him, you got to exercise, you got to do cardio. He was stuck at home. Obviously, there was also a quarantine or a lockdown in Mexico City. And I said to him, you've got to do exercise. You've got to call friends. You've got to connect with friends. You've got to also eat. He was eating less and less, and he wasn't eating any form of protein. I said, you've got to eat protein because you've also got to balance your brain chemistry. You need amino acids. So I don't just say, oh, I've got the answer to everything. No, I recognize that you are really a whole. And you've got to look at the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual components. Because life is lived in 4 realms: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual.
Okay. So it's been an hour. I think I'm going to close a little bit. I got 2 things. There's a question that I got via email that I'm going to answer. And if you want to say something after it, you can.
Sure.
And then I wanted to talk about SRTT one more time. I have something that I want to talk about on that. So here's a question I got in my email, and I hope this person is on here. How to talk to a person who cannot see that they are being selfish when they only give when it is convenient. Now, so I wrote my answers. I wasn't able to, because as I was writing the question, I just wrote out my answer. So I'm just going to kind of read it. So sorry if I'm not looking at you, whoever you are. But I'm not sure if you mean how to talk to them about that, or how to talk to them in general. But selfish is actually a pretty broad term. But when we hear it, we usually only think of it in the way that we translate it, which then makes it easy for us to dismiss it, right? I'm not selfish because we have a narrow understanding. But so what it sounds like to me is this person doesn't understand what love is, okay? Because this is a marriage, doesn't understand what love is. And since you mentioned in the email, I didn't put this, but since you mentioned that they are Christian, they must not be a follower of Jesus, because followers live as he did. Another word for follower is apprentice, right? Apprenticeship. When you're an apprentice, when you're under apprentice, you are under someone. You don't simply study what they said, but you study how they lived and you try to live that way. The other thing is this: I believe for someone to treat their spouse unkindly consistently, that it means that they do not understand the design laws of marriage, or they have unresolved childhood issues, or you guys have different relationship values, which for the Christian should be overcome by understanding and embracing God's design laws for marriage, right? And then it says, I did not read the whole message, but so I didn't read the whole message on here, but based on some of the things you guys said, you guys need to get help, because it also sounds like you yourself, the person who asked the question, may be trapped by religion and may be allowing things that God never intended for you to allow. So that's my answer to that particular question.
Very interesting perspective. So what I might add to that is, I think most of us have a definition of selfishness, and that is that the other person puts themselves first and never thinks of you, or very rarely thinks of you, or doesn't think enough of you, and so therefore you don't feel special or loved, and you don't believe that your needs are being taken care of. So what are you trying to achieve in your communication? Get clear about, the idea isn't just to say, well, Robert, you're just really, really selfish, and all you think about is yourself. Be very specific, because if you say that to me, whether I'm selfish or not, I'm going to shut down. I'm going to go, because you've just blanketly said, this is who I am. But if you say to me, Robert, I asked you to do such and such, and you didn't respond at all, and I felt that your response was very selfish. See, I'm now talking about something specific, and I'm talking about a behavior. So get clear about, what is it that you want your partner to change, in what way? Are they really just blanketly selfish? So number one, what is your definition of selfish? What do you want them to do? Present it as, I feel that when you do this, you're being really selfish. I feel that when you do this, you're not thinking about me at all. And this is where my needs are not being met. Mm-hmm. I would use Christianity to not to judge the person, but rather to say, if you're going to talk about selfishness, to say, we're encouraged in the Bible to be selfless, to be like Jesus, who thought about helping other people, but he also had boundaries. Yes, he gave up his life for everyone, but there were also times when he walked away from healing people. There's the great example, and I use this for people that are Christian, when I'm trying to say, set boundaries, say no, have the right balance. So I think Jesus just healed 2 people that were blind, and he said, don't tell anyone. And why did he say don't tell anyone? Because he's trying to escape through the crowd, and he feels someone tugging him, and I think she gets healed, but he escapes so he can go and pray and meditate. In other words, he says, I've done all this healing work, I now need this time for me. Because we could easily say, wow, Jesus is selfish. He could have healed all these people, but what does he do? He goes away and prays and meditates. No, he recognized that there needs to be a balance. Mm-hmm. So you can also, perhaps use scripture, use examples from the Bible to encourage someone to think more about other people in the relationship, the marriage. The third point that you said, which I think is valid, is recognize, where is this selfishness coming from? Like, why is it? Is it that this person's under some particular stress? Is there some other friction? Is there some other unresolved issue between the two of you? Or is it a childhood issue? Perhaps this person was raised to be selfish. And what I mean by that it is always much harder when you are married to an only child, because the only child got all of the attention. And I have a client with whom I had to help with this issue because this was an only client who was smothered by mum and dad and was never given any responsibilities. So he's completely irresponsible and he's completely self-absorbed. So then I've got to help him to say, how is this affecting your relationships? If you're constantly thinking only about yourself, guess with whom you'll end up? Yourself, because people will walk away. If you only think about yourself, you'll end up with only yourself. So for this lady who says, how do I deal with someone, how do I speak to someone who's selfish? Think first about giving specific examples. Talk about I, talk about feel. I feel unloved, or I feel ignored, or I feel that my needs are insignificant when you do this specifically, or when you did this, or when you failed to come home the other night and I had prepared a meal, I felt that you didn't care about me and you didn't care about what I was giving. And I felt that that was a selfish action because you weren't thinking about me. Now, therefore, I'm not attacking you. I'm speaking more about the behavior. Separate the behavior, because we're humans and we can easily become very defensive when someone attacks or criticizes us.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you started and you said that, I completely agree with that, because when we use those labels or whatever, it just makes you, it makes you shut down.
Shut down.
About how you feel, this makes me feel this way, or I feel like this. It's hard for someone to argue with that. Now, depending on their developmental level.
And it depends on the relationship too. For example, I've got a friend, a male friend, and I can say that to him. I can go, you know what, you're a selfish idiot. And he'll go, why? I go, because look at the way you just acted. But see, I wouldn't talk that way to my spouse, but men do talk that way to each other.
Yes.
We say those things and we don't get offended by it. We might be shocked and go, what are you talking about? Look at you. And I go, what? And we'll have this, but we won't hold on to the grudge. But I wouldn't do that with a partner. I wouldn't do that with my wife, with my girlfriend, with, some female friend. I'm going to be more gentle. It depends on the context of the relationship, because there are certain married couples who can talk exactly the way that I talk. And I've seen it, and they get along fine because that's their foundation, and they don't hold on to the grudge, and they'll just say, look, you're being an idiot. I remember this happened to me a long time ago. I was in my early 20s, and there was this girl that I'd met and I was hanging out with, and one time she said to me, have you listened to yourself? You're acting like a 12-year-old. I went, what? And she shocked me so much. I actually went, oh, I am acting like a 12-year-old. I am really an idiot in that situation. Right. But that was the kind of relationship we had. She could speak openly to me about that. And because I adored her and because I gave a lot of value to her words, I took it to heart, but I was never offended by it. I was willing to look at it. It was also pretty shocking because no one had ever spoken to me like that. And I went, whoa. But I chose to say, is it true? Am I really acting like a child? Am I sounding like an idiot? Oh, yeah. Okay.
I tell my clients, well, I tell anybody that I guess will listen. No, but I tell my clients, usually, obviously not all the time, but more times than not, we encounter evil people, not as much as we may think. And when, more than likely, I'm not saying it's not possible, but more than likely your spouse is not evil. Now, here's how I define evil when I say evil, meaning they're sitting around thinking of how to hurt you for no reason.
Their intention is to hurt you
all the time. Usually, even in the worst hurt, that's not your spouse's intention. Usually, your spouse is hurting you because of them, not because of you. It's how they learn to interact with people. It's how they've learned to defend themselves, how they've learned to hide. And, so it's rarely about them not loving you and more about them, may selfish, loving themselves or seeing themselves, but they're caught in, I usually say they're in trouble, they're in emotional trouble and they need help. And you may not help, but they gotta, it's not because you necessarily, they have an issue.
Okay, so I would say there's 2 points here. I understand exactly what you're saying. The first is if this person is treating you really badly and let's say they're cheating, that is an act of selfishness because they're not thinking about you. May not be evil, so their intention may not be to hurt you, but the problem is that they're being so selfish, they're not even thinking about how it will hurt you.
Right.
You're right, though. It is really powerful to say to the client, your husband, your wife, whoever it is, didn't set out to deliberately hurt you. Yes, they may not have thought about you or thought about how it's going to affect you, how it's going to hurt you. And that makes the act much more painful and shows you that this was a really selfish act. But be careful of saying to yourself, my husband did it deliberately to hurt me. My husband did it because he's evil. No, maybe he's just bloody selfish. And then that's got to be addressed.
And the reason I say that too, because if you think that they did it intentionally, and they think, like they did this to me, they wouldn't do anyone else like that, it's going to be more difficult for you to get to the point of forgiveness. Without forgiveness, your relationship halts. Like, you will not be successful at human relationships without forgiveness. That's just what it is. You're not going to.
Well, that's true. And also, if you're coming from the perspective of my husband did this deliberately, then you're going to be either become paranoid, neurotic, or at the very least, you're going to be engaging and wallowing in self-pity, or you're going to believe you're a victim. You're going to say, see, my life is bad. My husband just sets out to do things to hurt me. No, unfortunately, he's probably not even thinking about how it hurts you. So perhaps if you tell him how it hurts you, at least it gives him an opportunity to address that. And then if you find out he doesn't care, then you know what action to take.
Yes. So Dolores asked a question early, but we had already covered it. She asked, let me scroll back up. We don't have to redo it. I'm just letting you know, Dolores, we answered it. How do you deal with childhood trauma without reliving the pain? We did that at the beginning, and you may not have.
Well, I can explain it briefly if you like. No?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So what I said at the beginning of the session, we did talk a lot about this in detail, is that you can't heal trauma by reliving trauma. That's the foundation of what I do. You can't heal trauma by reliving the trauma. You can't let go of the pain by being in the pain. The way that I do it is through what I refer to as detachment, observation, or at least some sort of disassociation. So if you experienced a trauma in childhood, I'm going to find out what that trauma was, when it happened, and we're going to work together where I say to you, imagine the little girl, and then we're going to be interacting with her because it's symbolism, it's subconscious symbolism and imagery here because you have an image of her. And any time that if you start feeling painful emotion, even though you're looking at the little girl who was, say, abused or attacked or abandoned, I'll go, whoa, stop. Sally, hold on, pause. Why are we here? Why are you here? What's your job? And you'll say, my job is here to help this little girl, because I've already taught that to you before we began the session or before we began the process. So I have in place all these simple things to prevent you from reliving the pain. And I make this point very clear, you can't let go of the pain whilst you're in the pain. So when you are detached and you become the observer, and now your mission and purpose is to help this little girl, and ultimately that mission is to help her to let go of the pain and to bring compassion to her. So now your focus is not on me, it's on helping someone else, a third person that's really a little girl that exists in your mind. So sometimes I'll say, wait, this is not about you. You're on the phone with me. I'm here. You're on the phone. We're here to help this little girl. And just the ability to do that will separate you, and you suddenly realize, because this is also a form of cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness, that you're able to observe the emotion and the experience without being controlled by it. Because what usually happens is the emotion comes up, and now you're controlled and you're paralyzed by the emotion. But when I'm in the process and I show you how, look, I don't tell you this, but this is what you're actually doing. Look, you're actually speaking to the little girl that experienced the trauma, and notice that you can look at this trauma and talk about it and you're not feeling it. But we do release each of those emotions that were experienced in the trauma. It's a great technique.
Okay, so maybe about 8 to 10 more minutes. I have all three of these are about SRTT. for people because I want people to have this information. The first one, people often ask me when I describe it to them, they say, "Is it hypnosis?" So how is this different from hypnosis?
Well, the good news is I used to be a hypnotist, a comedy hypnotist, a stage hypnotist. Then I became a hypnotherapist, and then I started studying neurolinguistic programming, human behavior, psychology, etc. This is not hypnosis, but it began with hypnosis, meaning that clients used to come to me for hypnosis, and then I saw the limitations of hypnosis, other than the fact that it didn't really work over the phone. But also, you spend most of the time trying to, gain the trust of the client and build rapport so they can be hypnotized. But what happens if the client has trust issues? How are you going to help them? You're going to try to hypnotize them so that they can trust, but you need to gain their trust so you can hypnotize them. Anyway, it's not hypnosis, but there is a light trance state in the sense of an altered state. Because if I say to you right now, as you're watching this webinar or listening, close your eyes and think back to the best memory that you have as a child and tell me, what are you doing? In that moment, you're shifting from the present moment and you're reliving that wonderful experience. That's a form of hypnosis. It's a form of trance. But in this session, it's not like hypnosis or stage or comedy hypnosis where it looks like I'm controlling it, because I don't do hypnosis. But you are going back to a memory, and you'll bring up images that you may not have recalled before. Mm-hmm. And they'll seem relatively vivid, and you'll be able to identify all these emotions, but you're constantly in control because I'm just guiding you. And that's why earlier in the session, we talked about how sometimes clients don't want to let go of a particular emotion in the session because sadness or fear or anger has formed part of their identity. And they say, this is all I've ever known. So it's not hypnosis, and I'm not controlling you.
Okay. Now, you are in Florida. As a matter of fact, it's 8:21. I know it's late for you. But with you being in Florida, and Friday, with you being in Florida, most of your business, most of your clients you see over the phone. How is phone sessions effective? Why not video?
It's more effective than in-person therapy and video. I've been doing telephone. Now they've got a name for it. They call it teletherapy because people have been asking me about it, various reporters. I've been doing this for about 15 years over the phone, because what happened was I used to do in-person sessions, and sometimes clients would fly me to their city. Because I remember I was either in Miami or Orlando or somewhere. Clients would fly me into Houston. They'd fly me into LA. Sometimes clients would fly to me so that they could work with me over 3 days, one session each day. And what I've found since then, and I've actually created a video called The 6 Reasons That SRTT is More Effective Over the Phone Than in Person. And the first and foremost is, you don't need to leave your home. You don't need to dress up. You don't need to drive. You don't need that extra time. Number 2, you don't need to worry about what you're going to wear. You don't need to worry about how you're going to look. Number 3, you can be in a safe, comfortable place, wherever you want, sofa, bed, chair, rocking chair. Number 4, there's a sense of anonymity because you can just close your eyes. You're just on the phone. It's easier for you to let go and to be more vulnerable. Number 5, I don't absorb your emotions, because I've noticed this when I work in person with clients, their emotions feel much more powerful. If they're talking about sadness or pain, I'm feeling them. And it's not healthy for me to feel them either, because I'm trying to help you, because I don't want you to feel them. I want you to identify them. So it's not good for the therapist to feel that emotion and that pain, because then I feel drained, or it stops me from helping you. And I don't even remember what the 6th reason was. Well, I guess it's cheaper in the sense that, you don't need to fly, you don't need to travel, you don't need to park, you don't need to drive. You got more time. The other benefit is that because it's just over the phone, you're not busy and you're not distracted looking at, like I am now, looking at myself, looking at Clifton on this webinar. You're purely in the process. Plus, your eyes are closed for a lot of the time. So video isn't much advantage anyway. And now what I'm doing, this is beneficial for me to help you. Let me help me to help you. The benefit is, because you're on the phone, I'm listening very carefully, not just to the content of the words, but to the tonality, what you're saying, the pauses in between your words, and even the sounds you make. And this happens very often where a client will sigh and I'll go, hold on, you just sighed. What were you thinking and feeling? And now they'll reveal something that they wouldn't have revealed. Or there'll be a long pause and I'll say, what are you experiencing? Or something else will happen. I can say, I can hear it in your voice. So if you and I are in person, it's easy for me to be distracted as well. We both can get distracted because in SRTT, it's like precision surgery. All the focus is on the process. We don't want any distractions from anywhere else. So I gave you about 7 or 8 reasons why SRTT is more effective over the phone than it is with video or in person. And I've done this with clients across the globe, many of whom I've never seen before, never seen after. Maybe they've seen me because they've seen me on a TV show or on a video or a YouTube channel or read about me somewhere. But I don't look up my client to see what they look like. So my focus is purely on what's this issue. It's like going to an ER room and the client and the doctor comes in and says, where's the wound? Right here, let's get to it. That's what it is.
Yeah. And that last part, I do that too. Like I have some NFL players who are clients and I never go look. They tell me that. I'm like, oh, okay. Because usually I've never heard of them. And I never looked them up, their stats, who they played for.
Yeah.
Like,
I think you referred one of them to me. But here's an example. I get this a lot on LinkedIn and it drives me nuts. I get people who want to connect with me on LinkedIn. And what they primarily want to do is try and sell me some program. You know, they're usually someone that's become a coach that's suddenly a marketing coach or whatever. Anyway, so one lady contacts me and she wants to know how I became a celebrity life coach. And I said, well, it began because a TV producer came to me and said to me, would you work with Hulk Hogan on this TV show? And I said, sure. And then from there, other clients came to me. She said, so that was the way it was done? It wasn't intentional? I go, no, it wasn't intentional at all. And then she says, well, she was insinuating, or she clearly stated she wanted to work with celebrities. And I said to her, if you become enamored with your clients, you'll never be able to help them. If you fall in love with your clients or you put them on a pedestal, you'll never be able to help them, particularly celebrities, because celebrities are accustomed to everyone going, yes, 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 when you might need to say no, no, no. So I'm very careful in that situation to never ever think, because I've got a lot of clients who are doctors, I've got clients who are professors, I've got clients who are therapists. Imagine if I put them all on a pedestal. I've got clients who are high profile authors or athletes or musicians. I don't put them on a pedestal. I treat them as a real, authentic person who needs help in this moment.
Okay. So here's the last thing. And after this, we're going to close out. So I was doing some numbers. So my clients who are on here, because everyone on here is not my client, but my clients who are on here, if I've referred you to Dr. Wanis, and you haven't done a session with him, because some of you have, but if you haven't done a session, usually the thing that comes up is, well, how much is it? And I tell the cost plus the discount that I give. And so then you're hesitant. And so I've never done this before, but I wanted to break this down so people would see. So my lowest rate, because I have 3 different rates, but my lowest rate is $125 for 50 minutes, $125 for 50 minutes. And so that works out to about $2.50 a minute, right? Your sessions are 90 minutes. So at my rate, your session would be $225, but your session is actually $345. But trauma work with me is going to be, at least, if we do all of the work, like if you really do the trauma work and we get it done, because I can do trauma work.
Sure.
If I do it the traditional way, it's going to be about 40 sessions.
40?
40 sessions. That's about a year. Because 52 weeks, provided you miss some weeks and not coming every week, about 40 sessions. Now that equals out to, at my lowest rate, that equals out to about $5,000. Okay. Now trauma work with Dr. Wanis, on the low end, usually 1 or 2 sessions, but with sexual trauma, I updated. At first I had 5. So you said between 6 and 10. So I updated it to 8.
It could be between 5 and 10, but you're right.
Well, so I'm using 8. So I said for sexual trauma or things like that, and it varies, for about 8 sessions at your current $345 rate, that would work out to $2,760. So
And
in
done in 6 to 10 sessions,
yeah,
in
47
8 sessions.
versus 8, and then almost half of what you would pay. Now, I'm not trying to shoot myself in the foot. Number one, I did not get into therapy uh, for money or to become rich. I got into it to help people. Number two, what Dr. Wanis does, guys, is he helps me a lot because I don't want you in therapy forever. And so if I can have him deal with your trauma, and then we do like we fix your marriage or help you like live better that way, uh, to me, that's more productive. I'm not trying to have you in therapy forever. Just yeah, I don't. That's pointless. So I wanted to throw that out there, and I know we didn't talk about talking about price,
Well,
but I
that's
know.
fine. That's fine, and
Okay,
there's nothing to hide.
yeah.
Let me say that that's been my rate, the same rate for about 15 years.
Wow.
I've not put that up in 15 years. So, and if you look at it, and it's usually over 90 minutes, it's like an hour and 35, an hour and 40 minutes sometimes.
Hmm.
Now, I think it's an extraordinarily cheap because you go and do any other sort of therapy and you're not getting any help, you're not getting any benefit, and you
Right.
keep going back again and again and again. There was some, I'm going to say, crazy psychologist who was talking about how he helped this client, and it took 4 years. And he said that he would see this client sometimes 2 and 3 times a week for 4 years. Are you serious?
Yeah.
So you're talking about, let's say it was 40 weeks times 3, that's 120 sessions in 1 year, times 4, that's 480 sessions. Even
Wow.
if your insurance is paying for it, even if that was $100, multiply 480 by 100,
Yeah.
multiply that by 200. And if you're a psychiatrist, it's usually 200 and something dollars for 20 minutes, just enough time for the psychiatrist to write a prescription, because that's all they're basically doing.
Mhm.
So I don't have any problem with the price that I charge. And I say to people, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. If your car breaks down, you'll suddenly find the money.
Mhm.
So you got to work out how important is your mental and emotional health. But I
Mhm.
also understand, Clifton, that unfortunately a lot of people have been to a lot of therapists who just are either useless, inept, or make you worse. Like I
Mm.
gave you that example of that 19-year-old who goes to a psychologist in Mexico City, because that's where he lives, for panic and anxiety. And he told me she made him, first the mother said it, but I asked him specifically, how did she make you worse? And he said, she gave me more fear. She made me feel more afraid. And she told me, well, listen, if your dad's an alcoholic, then you'll probably be an alcoholic, and that's the way it is. And I'm like, what? Why would you say that to someone? It doesn't help them. It doesn't benefit them. And no, you're not going to be an alcoholic because you're going to heal your issues. You're going to do what your dad never had a chance to do. So,
Mhm. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm replying to someone who is in Florida. They say they have to go, so I was replying to them. They say, "Yeah, I'm in Florida too, and it's late, so I have to go."
come on, you make it past our bedtime.
Uh, and
Well,
then
listen, hold on a second. So
uh-huh.
before you say anything else, since we're about to wrap up, let me take this opportunity to acknowledge, to honor, to express my sincere, heartfelt appreciation for you, Clifton, because you're one of the only people I've ever met who truly, truly cares about his clients to the extent that you say, you need help, go to this guy. You know, I'm not going to take the client from you, but that's not the point. The point is that you're choosing to help them. You think of your client first before you think of your bank account. You think about the best interest of your client before you think about your business. And that's because you come from the heart. And and mate, you know, I know when you and I talk on the phone, because we talk on the phone regularly, I'm always joking with you, but I do want to recognize and I want to honor and acknowledge the just the beautiful way that you really care about people, because it's extraordinarily genuine, it's sincere, it's exemplary. You're a role model, and um, and I don't know how else just to say thank you. And I do say that to your clients, to say Clifton Brantley really, really cares, and that's why you need to thank him, not just because he sent you to me, but because he cared enough about you to send you to me. So thank you.
Well, no, thank you. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. It means a whole lot. Sometimes I don't know if this ever happens for you, But as a therapist, so I'm pretty confident in what I do. I believe this is what God put me here to do, right? So, when I'm walking in my purpose, I'm good. But at the same time, every now and then I start to wonder, man, am I really being effective? Am I, really impacting people? And so,
Can I say this? I'll answer that question for you.
it feels it's validating. And then when a
Oh,
client,
okay.
I will, when a client says, when you told me such and such, it really changed everything. Like that makes me okay, great. So I appreciate you saying that. I really do.
Well, I'm saying it from my heart, and you are worthy of it, and you deserve it, and it's you. Um, it's natural for all of us to doubt if we're making a difference in the world at any point in time, no matter what work we do, whether we're a mother, a father, a brother, or a sister, whether we're taking care of a sick person. We'll always have those moments of self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, recognize you're not perfect. Second, you can't save everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Third, you can't help everyone.
You taught me
But
that.
you're engaging, did I? Oh, you're
Yeah.
engaging in the ripple effect. You help one person, that one person's going to positively impact a lot of other lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be just something you say that can send someone on a beautiful new path.
Mm-hmm.
And if it comes to you easily, and if it's something you look forward to doing, then it's your passion and purpose.
All right. Well, guys, I thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate it. Because, like I say, I often forget this part. I do have to make a living. I completely forgot I had this offer in here that I was supposed to offer, and I never did. So it's up now. It probably won't be, but it's the same conflict resolution course that I've been telling you guys about. I want to say that. And then also, too, it was something else I wanted to say. I saw in the chat. I can't remember. But anyway, I have a surprise for you guys. Kind of. Originally, there was not going to be a replay, but I decided to turn the replay record thing on. And so you guys will be able to watch this again if you want to, because a lot of good information. And I know you guys weren't taking notes like you were supposed to. so,
I didn't take any notes.
Right. So I'll make it accessible to you so that you can watch it again, because I really want you to get the help that you need. Okay. All right. So thank you again, Dr. Wanis. Everyone, you guys have a good night. As you know, it's Friday night, so I'm heading to the wood shop to go make something. You guys.
One more compliment.
Yes.
Because you talked about Christianity a lot of people talk about it, but you walk it.
Thank you. Now that's the biggest compliment. That is the biggest. Yeah. So, okay. Thank you, Dr. Wanis, and I'll see everyone next time. All right. Bye-bye.